and welcome to Conversations with Reverend G. I am Reverend Grenetta Mason, aka Reverend G, and I'm here every Monday night live on WEMS Radio from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. You can find me on YouTube and on Facebook every Monday night, bringing you conversations with guests from all walks of life. We talk about love, we talk about life, and we talk about spirituality. And we talk about spirituality from a practical point of view. How does spirituality support you in your life every day? I talk about the spiritual toolkit. What spiritual practices are your go to practices? What spiritual practices are personal to you? There's so many different types of practices that we each can create our own personal spiritual toolkit. So tonight I have a very special guest, and we're going to talk about life, love, and spirituality. You can find me every day on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason, on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. And please follow me on YouTube for inspirational messages throughout the week. Tonight, I have Melody Benitez as my guest. Melody is an activist and an educator. I'm excited to have Melody here to support me in bringing you great information that you can use. And the thing for me is to support you in living your best life with grace and ease. So tonight we're going to have this great conversation that you can take away some things that you could use. Melody, how are you?
Hello. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How you doing, Reverend G?
I'm doing really good, right? It's been a really, really great day. So Melody, introduce yourself to everybody.
Yes, yes. So
Mhm.
I will start with the fact that I am a native New Yorker. All the way up until 2 years ago, I had to leave my hometown behind. But I was born and raised in East Harlem. Moved a little bit downtown to 96th Street. I would love to talk about that during our time here. It's just like the how worlds apart those two different streets are.
Mhm.
And then, like I said, 2 years ago, moved down with my family. Moved down with my family after having my son, who is now turning 2 in just 2 months. So I am a mom as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
Um, since graduating college, I was like a lost soul, as many young people can empathize with, like, right, not being too sure about what my career path was going to look like. Majored in political science, knew that I didn't want to go run for public office.
Mhm.
And so I found this like realm of politics that's not traditional, not mainstream, and that's activism work. So I started doing parent advocacy with a small organization called Class Size Matters. I got to learn so much from the parents who are on the ground, really trying to push for changes in their schools, for their children's education. Was really inspired for that. And I'm like, wow, what spaces are like this for young people,
Mhm.
for the students that might not be in school, but still pursuing educational means, still pursuing career paths, didn't get the support that they needed in the school or in the community at large.
Mhm.
So went on to an organization called Yaya Network, stayed there. That was my political home for quite some time. Met a lot of young activists that taught me a lot of what I know to this day and still utilize. And then just grew from there, just kept serving in the nonprofit world. And then I just found myself down in Florida. I'm like, what can I do in political in Florida?
Mhm.
That's on my side of the sphere of the political spectrum.
Mhm.
And so that's when I started to consider going into teaching. It's something that I've been doing kind of like unconventionally outside
Mhm.
of the school space.
Mhm.
So I've always was interested in getting into education. This was now my opportunity to do so. So now I'm currently a high school social studies teacher at a very
Oh.
big very, very big school in Broward County, Florida, South Florida. So that's pretty much
Okay.
everything I am. I
You know.
identify as Afro Latina,
Hmm.
identify as queer, I identify as genderqueer, um, and yeah, I go by either she or them pronouns.
Okay. Okay, that's a lot, girl. So I want to start. Like,
I can start
okay,
anywhere.
we can go anywhere. Okay, great. So what I want to talk about, I know one of the things that's really interesting is I know you went to Villanova. So
Yes.
talk about coming from East Harlem, right,
Hmm.
and going to Villanova, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about a little bit about the decision making and then when I found out.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I, like many other public school students, felt like just underserved in my schools. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really necessarily understand all the reasons why my school was underserved or why I didn't feel like I had every opportunity that could be afforded to me. But I knew at that point of graduating high school that it was like my time to go to see what was else was out there.
Mm-hmm.
um, I had a mentor who helped me apply to college. He was amazing. He was so kind, so empathetic, so dedicated to the work that he was doing. And then I also saw an alumni of my high school who gave us a tour of Villanova, and she just looked like she was doing so well. So I said, this seems like a good challenge for me. It seems like a world away from New York City. The whole neighborhood looks different. It's a suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania. It's a beautiful neighborhood. It's in one of the wealthiest areas in Pennsylvania. And so I decided to go. They gave me a good financial aid package and they had a good political science program. So I decided to, for the first time, leave the nest.
Mm-hmm.
Then what I found,
We got
then
there.
what I found that even though yes, there are pockets and spaces and communities of people of color on Villanova campus, it was infamous for its nickname Vanilla Nova. Uh,
Okay.
so I got the experience of what it was like to go to a predominantly white institution.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I finally got the experience of what it's like to have friends outside of my own race, outside of my class, and just all the cultural differences that go just into the social life on campus,
Mm-hmm.
the academic life, like being in class with people who are really like taught to a test versus the need for critical thinking and just understanding what else beyond your own bubble is happening in the
Mhm,
world.
mhm,
So I found a lot of great mentorship where I didn't think I would find.
mhm,
I found a really great mentor in my education teacher. She is like the probably one of the sole reasons, a very prominent figure in my life of why I took the route I did as far
mhm,
as education advocacy goes.
mhm,
Um, so yeah, that all of that to say, while I went through a lot of trauma. I went through a lot of struggles on Villanova campus. I don't necessarily think I would change it. I
mm,
wouldn't tell
okay,
people to lean into their traumatic experiences in that way, but you can't change the past, and I don't think I would change the past if
mhm,
just knowing what I took away from that experience.
mhm, mhm. Right. The things that I like that you said, the trauma, you can't take it back, but you can heal from it, right?
Absolutely.
And move forward and be able to see the benefits of um what would you say would be some of the key takeaways for you? Because it's interesting as a native East Harlem.
Hmm.
You know,
Because
what would
you gotta make sure you say the East because people have this misconception that East and West Harlem are the same thing, and historically they've
then
always been two different things. So you have
right.
to respect the uniqueness of both of those areas, even if you want to pay homage to Uptown in general.
Right. And I mean, yeah, and that brings me to what you were saying. You wanted to talk a little bit about the East Harlem, your experience living and growing up in East Harlem. And then before you left, you were on 96th Street.
Yeah.
What about that experience
Yes.
stays with you, you know?
Absolutely. and the way that it connects to the work that I could try to continue to do in my activism is that you can judge a book by its cover, or you can judge from the outside looking in. But in reality, these communities have a wealth of resources already in them. They might be labeled as poor, they might be labeled as problematic, as violent, but there was just so much there that I think the people living in the community never been told, never been affirmed in their own value and what they could do in their own potential, and told about what kind of was robbed from them not
Mm,
having the resources that other communities have. So I think the key takeaway is that living 10 blocks down could drastically change your life just from this sheer difference of what opportunities are offered to those folks versus the ones in your old zip code. So I try to, that's a key takeaway, never to judge uh, a neighborhood, what it looks like, people based on the neighborhood they're from, and to really empower people who are from the area to start activating and coming together and really igniting change in their own community. That you can have really safe, rewarding opportunities for young people where they are. You
mm,
don't have to get them to get out the hood,
mm,
as we
mm,
like to say. Let's get out
mm,
the hood.
mhm,
Yes and no at the same time. Let's get
mhm,
this hood out of the box that we put it in and start pouring into it as many
mhm,
resources as possible.
mhm. Yeah, that is very important too. It's about building our communities
Yep.
rather than trying to go and be in other communities.
Yep.
Building it and bringing back and make sure that the resources are available in the community. When you worked with Yaya, talk about some of the different projects that you worked on as an activist, and you work particularly with youth, right?
Yes.
Because it's it's great when we can get youth to get involved at an early age
Yep.
in being in the community, making the communities different, taking a part in activism.
Hmm. Yeah, so one of our main focuses at Yaya. So I also want to uplift that Yaya is a youth activist organization, but specifically for young people that are 15 to 19 years old.
Oh, okay.
Um, and it's
Hmm.
very important that I make that distinction because we know that young people go all the way up to maybe 2029,
Hmm.
depending on what you're talking about.
Hmm.
I hope I still fall in that category, even though I am now 30, going on 31.
You want to
But
still be in that category, right?
I just want to stay young forever. But a lot of youth spaces are geared towards people who are kind of seen as college age or a little
Hmm.
bit older. And this space is led and run and designed for centering young people ages 15 to 19 or even younger. So it was really a powerful space to walk into and feel like, yeah, people who are in high school or maybe not in high school because of other reasons, really taking ownership and leadership in this space and feeling good about the work that they're doing. Um, so the main mission obviously was to continue to build and empower young people in their own activism skills, but we focused on a particular issue, and that issue was the school to prison pipeline.
Oh, okay.
um, it was something that I was impacted by as a young person, and still carry that trauma with me to this day.
Hmm.
But now, what's going on now is that we've evolved the activism around that work through collaboration, through coalition work, and really honed in on focusing on metal detectors in schools. So that work is really predominantly led by Shakti, who is the organizer there, the director of organizing work. She has done so much work. So I'm telling you, one of the people that I've learned so much from is Shakti, and just at such a young age has already had so much knowledge and resources and skills about organizing in New York City, and could really like tell you, oh, you should check out this organization if you're interested in
Hmm.
this. you care
Mhm.
about these issues, or if you're a person who's from this community, you should check out these organizations. So really in touch on the ground. Um,
Resources, the resources available. Right.
Absolutely. And then
Mhm.
another project that I'm particularly proud of is I can't remember what it's transitioned into, but one of the programs that we created because we just understood that for in order for young people to do this work, they need to look inward, right? And
Mhm.
they need to explore what does it mean to be a leader to them. How does that connect to the different parts of their identity?
Mhm.
Um, and just have a, like you said, like a spiritual exploration to build their own toolkit that empowers them even in the toughest times, even with the strongest of obstacles and forces against them,
Mhm.
how to really just buckle down, know who you are, and continue to push forward, regardless of all of that.
So I like that there's a strong component of self, looking at yourself, taking
Absolutely.
care of yourself, because you can be so
Yes.
it I think it also creates more intention of
Yes.
what you want to do. It supports you, and
Yep.
being able to have young people at an early point start
Hmm.
to have self-worth, start to understand who they are, and be able to work through, like, being an activist at the same time, honoring who they are,
Yep. Hmm.
through the inward work that
Yep.
they have to do. So I think that's really, really an important, component of all of it. I think about now. So talk about the shift for you from prior to all the killings, prior
Yes.
to now we've shifted into this new whole kind of inclusion, the
Hmm.
EI inclusion thing. What's the
Hmm.
shift for you? Because you were there prior. What have you seen the shift?
I I think I'll take the opportunity to be in this kind of very authentic space to say, I don't see much of a shift. I
Mm,
think I see conversations being had that weren't had before,
mm,
and maybe spaces created for them, but I still see the same fear. Uh,
mm,
and the result or the outcomes of where those conversations may lead. And what I mean by that is, in order to do real, for me
mhm,
personally, and I'm sure there's so many people who might agree with me, for me to be serious about diversity, equity, and inclusion work, that those changes need to be dramatically at the leadership level.
mm,
And anything other than that feels decorative. Like it feels symbolic, really, not
mm,
really in practice, more in theory, and pushing idealistic values without action.
mhm,
So when I walk into an organization and they say, "Oh, we practice DEI, we encourage, we support people of color joining the space, taking leadership," that's a
mhm,
nice thing to say. And
mhm,
yeah, maybe they'll get more applicants of color, but
mhm,
what are they really doing on the inside to
mhm,
empower those folks to
mhm,
like, respect their expertise, respect how maybe their experience looks differently, and why that might be a plus to
mhm,
whatever leadership role they have.
mhm,
And so until then, until we actually see people, maybe I'm going to be radical and saying stepping out of their own leadership roles to say, maybe I'm no longer needed in this space. Maybe that person, that woman of color that has been working here for 10 years and never had a promotion
mhm,
might be ready to step up, and I might need to be out of this organization in order for that to happen. But I
mhm,
don't think people are ready for those outcomes yet.
mhm. Yeah, that is interesting, and that's kind of my perspective. But I'm not really in the space of having those conversations,
Hmm.
or seeing, coming from my whole corporate experience at the time when these conversations. I love what you said. It just summed it up for me. It's just conversations.
this is great, but it's also exhausting. Like, you know how many people across different organizations are just done. They're actually like, you know what, keep the DEI consultant out of the organization until you're ready to actually take action. Because then we'll just having frustrating conversations that just resurface some of the negative experiences it
brings the trauma
comes.
back to you, right? It's
Mhm.
like let's go.
With no incentive, like no incentive. Like I'm just here to listen to people talk about their feelings, and it goes nowhere. So it's just like it feels like a very warped feeling of therapy, a very twisted form of therapy for your coworkers, and you get nothing out of it.
Right.
Other than to say maybe this needs to be a breakup. maybe, maybe we need to just leave this
Right,
organization and find another
exactly.
home.
Yeah, and I think we're finding the reality of it is that we're finding more and more people of color going to do their own businesses, stepping
Exactly.
out there. And the thing that I say, the funds have to be made available for them to
Exactly.
step. You want to do some DEI, give these small businesses some money
Exactly.
so that they
Hmm.
can build their
Absolutely.
companies, right? So that they can have the funds that they need in order to
Yes.
get their products to market, to do what it is and
Yep.
be creative, right? Don't
Yep.
keep putting us in the slave quarters in these companies. That's
I
how,
hear that.
you know what I'm saying?
I hear it
You know,
all, and I'm here for
please,
all of it.
right? Yeah, let's have some change happen, right?
Hmm.
You know, that real change.
Yep.
Um, and I don't want to discount the change that we do see, right? I
Yep.
don't want to
Exactly.
discount that you see more Broadway plays that are out
Exactly.
there, right? I don't want to
Hmm.
discount all of the things that are really happening,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
all of it, like we talk about where we see the inequality of it, but I want to acknowledge, yeah,
Yep.
there's some things we see happening too,
Yeah.
but it's gonna take a whole lot, right? Uh, I
Absolutely.
mean, and we're here for it, though.
I mean, hey, if the revolution will be televised, they're gonna
Yeah,
have to get a lot of tape. They're gonna have to bring all the disc, all the memory, all the USBs, because
right.
it's gonna take a long time to record it.
Yeah,
It's just the
exactly.
progress is very slow. But I do agree. We have to acknowledge when we're going in the right direction. Um, because people need brownie points. Like we got they need affirmation. Like I see what you're doing here, and that's
Hmm.
great. I need
Right.
you to turn it up a little bit more, though.
Right, exactly. Right. We still here waiting, right?
Uh-huh.
We're still here trying to wait to see what else is going on, right?
Yep.
Um, in the education field, I remember one time we went out, right? And
Yes.
there was the whole charter school conversation.
Oh my God, do you remember that? It's one of my favorite stories to tell. It really is. I didn't know quite what I was walking into, but
Oh my, right? So
I
what?
I I thrive in it. I thrive in conflict wherever it finds me, but preferably when I'm having a drink.
And it's like now you're a high school middle school teacher, teaching
Yeah,
social
high
studies,
school. Yep, yep.
high school teacher social
Big boys,
studies,
big girls.
right? And
Mhm.
you weren't a teacher then, right? But you had a strong opinion, right?
I did. I did. And I made it known.
Yes, you did, right? What are your thoughts these days on, the education system and how
Mhm.
you felt just in New York City compared to, where you are now in Florida? Give us a little.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a different beast down here. But I do still feel the same way I do about public education, and that it should be fully funded, fully resourced. It should be the thing that, at the very least, along with many other needs like healthcare, like employment, like housing, People should be able to access a really excellent education at their public schools. And unfortunately, there have been a number of different reforms that have a sort of facade that even though this is a great opportunity presented, behind the scenes, it's dismantling the system we know as public school.
Mhm.
Um, and so I do feel that charter schools or school choice all sound like great things that we want to get behind. But if it is at the expense of public schools, I can't wholeheartedly be for it.
Mhm.
So while in practice, I might support a particular charter school because
Mhm.
they're doing well, they are accountable, they're transparent, they actually accept all students and not just students that make their grades look great. Um, and so their assessment scores and they get more funding, um, that they're really doing great work. I can't knock them. But as
Mhm.
a system, as a solution to what's going on in our public school system now, I don't support that as a reform that works.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. And what is the system in Florida like? The school system there.
I think that it's similar in a lot of ways,
Okay.
but for
Okay.
one thing, the high schools down here are huge. They're huge.
Mm.
And traditionally, you would go to your zone school. So, for high school students in New York, you have a choice of what schools you want to go to. Some of them are specialized, so you have to do a little bit more work, but generally you pick out of 12 schools, you put 12 schools on the list. If you get into one of them, that's your school. It doesn't matter whether it's an hour and a half commute away from you.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, in Florida, it's similar that you can have a choice. There are other schools that students can apply to, but because of that, it's they enter into a contract, and so it feels like this is something an opportunity that could be taken away from you at any point, rather than something that you have access to and should be afforded regardless of where you live.
Mhm.
So I think when it comes to neighborhood and zone schools, Florida is way more strict around it. There's fewer options to really go outside of your zone school unless you go to one of these lottery based choice schools.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
it's interesting. It's a very, so I teach at a very big school. I teach 100 and about 120, 160 students or so.
A day?
Yep.
In one
Not a day.
day?
In a week, I see them a couple of times.
Oh.
Uh,
And I'm like, in a day,
oh my
right,
God.
right, your total roster.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but
Right.
that I still got to think about them even when I'm not teaching them, even though they're not inside my classroom currently. I have to think about them. So
Mhm.
I think that in Florida we have a different political environment. So whereas in New York, cameras in classroom would be the last thing that teachers or parents or any like politicians would support. Down here it might be something that's considered. Even when we go back to the issue of school to prison pipeline, New
Mhm.
York, we're currently trying to get police or cops or SROs, whatever term you want to call them, out of schools. In Florida, they might vote to have them. I mean, they do have them, but they might think very strongly and positively of those people on campus as a support to students, not something that makes them feel like they're in prison or being policed in some way. So it's the politics is very, very uh, in, embedded into political and into any public system like school systems or like Medicaid or things like that. And
Mhm.
so in a different state like Florida, you're going to see a lot of differences. But I will say that I am in South Florida, I'm in Broward County. So it is one of the bluest, most progressive
Mhm.
areas of
Mhm.
Florida. And so you can
'Cause I
still
was gonna
find.
say it's interesting coming from New York and the
Hmm.
whole political environment, and then going down to Florida, right? What was that
Hmm.
transition like? But well, you just said being in the bluest of blue, right?
Yep.
What has that been like to transition to? Because I was thinking of some going to North Carolina, and then I was like, oh no, maybe not, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes we take into consideration the politics.
Yes.
And you came
Yes.
from New York to Florida. What was that? And during this time too, it must have been. Give us some of
Yeah.
your experiences.
Oh, um, well, you'll see a lot more outright Trump supporters, so it's visible. So I want to say that any racism, any discrimination you might experience is going to be visible. It's going to be overt. It's going to
Mhm,
be
mhm,
right in your face, not so like shamefully whatsoever.
mhm,
Um, Whereas in New York, you had to feel like you had to make an argument, a case for it. You need to document it. You need to explain why these things are racist, why these things are discriminatory. Because other than that, everybody's not racist in New York. So I think there's so many things that feel like a breath of fresh air that I wasn't expecting. Like, oh,
mhm,
I know that's
mhm,
that person comes from a very different political spectrum than I do.
mhm,
Maybe can't have, those conversations over dinner or
mhm,
at a play date with my son's, soon to be friends, parents,
mhm,
But as in, I appreciate that because I kind of know what I'm dealing with when I enter
mhm,
those things.
mhm,
Whereas in New York, it felt like I was just constantly trying to peel back layers of an onion just for
mhm,
people to empathize what my experience was as a woman of color in any space, whether it be work, school, whatever.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that is interesting. Of what are some of the projects right now that you're passionate about? And now you're in Florida as a teacher. What are some of the projects you're working on that you're passionate about? If you have time, right? Being a
Yeah,
mother and a teacher, right?
I was gonna say, I think to be quite honest, the project I'm most focused on is myself.
Mm-hmm,
Because I'm transitioning, because I'm adjusting not just to a whole different state, I'm adjusting to being a mom,
mm-hmm,
I'm adjusting to doing full-time work and being a full-time mom, right? No breaks.
mm-hmm.
Um, I'm adjusting to being a driver, just got my driver's license on the road. Watch out, stay far behind me. If you ever see me on the road.
Mm-hmm,
So there's just been so many new things happening in my life in the past year alone that I really just want to focus on feeling like I'm doing what I want, the things that I want to get out of life, the things I want to be, doing that well. And
mm-hmm,
so coming into a high school, new teacher, mid-year, after a year of remote learning, there's just so much catching up to do. So
mm-hmm,
for me, my project is to really get to build a relationship with my students, build a relationship with my coworkers, the teachers that are mentoring me, the administrators, anybody who's like really taking me into their community and just saying, I'm here to stay. Here's what I offer, and here's
mm-hmm.
what I hope to learn. So I think, you know, that and building my relationship with my son and making sure he has every opportunity that I didn't have back in New York. Those are my main two projects. And then
So you
myself.
you think you're gonna like give Florida a good try here, huh?
I mean, there's only one way to do it, and that's to commit to it. I don't think I'm coming back to New York. I think the weather is convincing enough. I
Okay.
really doesn't need to give anymore for me.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's it. Born and raised in New York, you're out,
Uh-huh,
right?
I'm out. And I mean, the saddest thing is that even though I love my city, for a lot of people, it's becoming something that's too hard to survive. So we have built this mindset of you make it in New York, you make it anywhere, and so
Mhm,
people stay longer, longer, pushing
mhm,
through so much struggle, financial, economic hardships, social hardships that they should never endure, even if they're in a state that is ideally a progressive state, ideally doing a lot of great things.
Mhm.
Um, but that city is so expensive to leave it. And so some people are just not living their best lives just because they're trying to
Live
mm,
in New York, right?
and make it, in a city that is seemingly full of opportunities, but still have a lot of closed doors.
Mhm. Mhm. Yep, being hopeful. So, let's
Hmm.
shift and tell us about your spiritual journey. Did you grow up in church, and where you now are on your journey?
Yes, I love to talk about this. I grew up in the Catholic Church.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely one of the most boring churches you can be in.
Mm.
So they sing Gregorian chants. And while I think some people might argue that this is very beautiful music, it was something that put us to sleep. I swear, every time we prayed, we looked forward to those moments because we just went to take a nap. Like, so, and that carried on to Villanova University. It's a Catholic university,
Mm.
same environment. So I kind of like stepped back. I actually went to Villanova and was because I wasn't um fully fully converted into the religion. Like I didn't go through my confirmation or my communion because we had picked up and left. And so we didn't go back to our old church
Mhm.
and kind of just stopped going to church as a family. So when I went to Villanova, I was like, oh, maybe this might be the time to do my communion. They have an adult program.
Mhm.
But just so many other things just like rubbed me the wrong way. And so I kind of just also just stepped back and just kept away from doing that. It wasn't until like in the past few years actually, with you and Jasmine, that I've kind of like stepped back into being okay going back to church. And I remember when your daughter brought me to a very, very entertaining Easter Sunday service,
Mhm.
and they had done a whole performance. They were talking about Jesus and ways that he might appear attractive to us, and just so many things that I just really truly enjoyed. And so
Mhm.
it brought the love that I had for being inspired in that way, for being inspired in such a spiritual way, for allowing somebody's interpretation of the word of God to uplift me in the moments. Because that's one thing, regardless of whether I went to a Catholic church or a Christian church, it felt like anytime they were speaking, it felt just relevant to what I was going through. And it was just like a
Mhm.
magical experience, especially as a young person. It's like, oh my God, how does this person know? It's like
Mhm.
pretty much it's argued that most things that we will face as human beings, most struggles we'll face, there's probably something in that book for it.
Mhm.
That's I guess that's the premise of the whole entire book.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
just
so,
guessing.
right. That's the premise of the book,
Gotta help me somewhere. Gotta somewhere.
right?
And I love people who could just quote any verse in those times of need. I see it as such a powerful tool for them. And
Mhm.
I, miss out on places in my childhood that could have been possible. But again, where I'm at today is that I don't shy away from it. I'm
Mhm.
not the most religious person, but I'm very spiritual. And the way that shows up for me is really like, again, back to my activism work or just becoming an activist. A lot of people, I feel like, are again afraid of this activist label because they think of it of being out in the world, being out in the streets, putting your life on the line for things that you care about. And yes, that's true. But I think a lot of it also is about a spiritual journey, about questioning things we used to know or thought we knew, um, and allowing a different perspective and allowing us to be wrong, allowing us to say acknowledge any harms that we might have created, not just towards ourselves or but towards other communities that we know we didn't traditionally understand because their voices weren't being heard. And to say,
Mhm.
you know what? I grew up my entire life thinking this was the way to be. And actually, I'm absolutely wrong. And I'm now, how do I be accountable to the ways that I've maybe caused harm or,
Mm.
you know, kind of
Mhm.
spread the wrong message in my life?
Mhm.
So I am so I committed to that spiritual journey. Like when I talk to my young people that I teach,
Mhm.
I'm constantly reminding myself that
Hello.
I don't know. I might know some.
Okay. Mhm.
I might know some um, experiences that you might have. I might have my own experiences, but please teach me because there's so much I don't know, so much
Mm.
I don't have, um, so much experience that I don't have myself. And I think that that's just deeply connected to a spiritual journey because what is God? Our pursuit of knowing what is God is knowing who we are as people.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, so
Mhm.
that is something that I always uplift as a spiritual person. I really care about human beings. I care about supporting them, being their best selves, and pushing through adversity as people who do face adversity, no matter what background you're from.
Mhm.
And knowing that you can find power not just inside, but that it's multiplied by being together and in community.
In
And that's
community.
why I lean towards communities like churches. They're big,
Mhm.
big churches down here. They do
Mhm.
a lot of theatrical stuff. They do music performances and things like that. So my family does go to church, and they're always
Oh,
like,
okay.
"You got to get out here." And
Mhm.
so at some point, I'm gonna make it to my first mega church down in Florida.
So that is like the big church. So that's pretty cool. Um,
Uh-huh.
what would you say are would be your spiritual practices? I talk
Yeah.
about the spiritual toolkit and how each person, it's personal to you and what practices. So I always like to share what would be your top three practices that you say work for you.
Got it. So number one, I love intention setting.
Hmm.
That's a really if I had any practices at all or tools at all to offer, it'd be setting an intention and doing that on a daily basis. You can do
Ooh.
it almost on a every minute basis, depending on what type of life you live in. You gotta have the intention to enter every conversation with
Mhm.
a positive mindset.
Mhm.
But really to acknowledge what the goals are that you have, what energy you want to bring. So it's actually something that I do literally, I think, when I enter any room.
Mhm.
So I'm entering the conversation here, my intention is to be authentic, to be
Mhm.
myself, to
Mhm.
share how my own experiences make me feel like I'm good for this position, I'm good for this role,
Mhm.
I'm valuable teacher to my students and things like that. My
Mhm.
intention is to not cause harm. My intention is
Mm.
not to be another authority figure talking down to you, but
Mhm.
somebody who is an equal and really trying to uplift you and support you and learn how to best support you based on what works for you.
Mhm.
So attention setting is a huge, huge thing because it makes me um, grounded in the things that I always care about, but maybe step out of practice because life happens. And
Mhm.
so now I'm in a
Mhm.
negative mindset and I'm putting things out there that I didn't intend to. So
Mhm.
attention setting definitely.
I like that one's really good. Yeah. Okay.
What else? What
What is?
else?
What is?
Goody.
Right.
Um, I think I think journaling
Mm.
is a huge, huge tool that people should use in their spiritual journey. Again, and not just journaling for like a day at a time, journaling and then looking back at things that you've written, things that you talked about, things that you experienced, and reflecting on how you're different from that moment in time. What are things you've learned, and where are you taking yourself? Where are you going in the future?
Mhm.
So I think journaling allows you to be connected outside of your body, outside of your mind. um, and hold yourself accountable to some of the words that you've written on the page.
Mhm.
You said you want to change, and you've been writing about it for a year now. So, when is that change going to happen?
Mhm.
So I think journaling is another spiritual tool that I use to really tap into what it is I want that I'm maybe afraid to put out there.
Mhm.
Um, and what else? And then I just say very like last, like just again being in community, not being
Mhm.
afraid. Let's say it's a lot of people find community in the church, but some people might not want to go to church to find community for
Mhm.
whatever reason.
Mhm.
Not being afraid to start building your own community or finding those spaces. So, um, a very simple examples like family dinners. I think the thing that brought me down to Florida was that I just acknowledged that I can't be without my family.
Mhm.
Um, I need them. They're my best friends. They're my best supporters.
Mhm.
They really know who I am, even if they might not know the full spectrum of who I am in ways that other people who I've met in my life know me. They are the best sources of of positive, powering energy. They make me feel like I'm my best self and I could
Did
conquer
they move
any.
from New York? Your family moved from New York to how long have they been out of New York? A long time?
A long time. My brother, my sister, the longest, it came out like probably over 10 years ago.
Oh,
Then my
okay.
mom, because they
Mhm.
had her two grandkids down there. And my sister, who had my nephew, her son, she was before me, and then me. I'm the last one.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think creating those connections, creating that community, whether it's something as informal as like a a dinner, or meetings with your friends, or whatever like space you can find, just
Yeah, we.
allowing yourself to sit with people
Mhm.
and acknowledge the comfort
Mhm.
and the power that comes with being with people, even
Thank you.
if you're really introvert. You don't have to you don't have to be dancing in the middle of the room, but just acknowledging
Mhm.
that this feels safe here and it's okay to be connected.
Mhm. That is true because I always talk about community, and your family is your community, and that's really great. And we have a lot of different communities because we were in the momentum community, and
Yes,
that was
we
a
were.
whole, I still am.
That's a
We
vibe.
are,
That's a whole vibe. Behind those red doors.
Well, it's just like there's a
Hmm.
whole vibe.
Yep.
So when you introduce yourself as gender queer, right?
Hmm.
And I want to know more about that. Tell me what
Yeah.
does that mean, right, to you in your
Yeah.
world?
So for me, actually, I'll share, just what I used to think growing up.
Mhm.
I used to think, oh, when people hear the name Melody, they're going to think of this little tiny girl who, just too young, too small to take on the things that she might want to, right?
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
challenges that I think I'm ready for. It
Mhm.
just never fit me. Even it's nothing to say bad about my name. I'm very proud of who I am.
Mhm.
But what I started to learn now in my adult life is that there are a lot of stereotypes, a lot of labels tied to being a person who may be perceived as a woman,
Mhm.
um, rather than just somebody who's just seen as a human being. There's a lot of things that young women, particularly in young women of color, are told not to do, or ways not to be, because that is not woman-like, that is not ladylike.
Mhm.
Um, and I just really, really rebelled in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Uh, I didn't feel comfortable in the clothes that I wore. I didn't really feel comfortable being seen as the other girls in my school. Um, and I just felt more comfortable with the idea that if people heard my name, they wouldn't associate me with somebody who's like has breast or whatever, like and any other things that women experience when it's out there that that's their gender, right? Or that's the gender that they are perceived as. So
Mm,
I do say that I'm genderqueer because I don't really fit in that any of those boxes. I'm not saying, hey, I want to be robbed of any femininity that I
mhm,
have as a woman, as somebody who's grown up as a woman my
mhm,
entire life, but I also don't want to be put in that box. So I am what is called as gender non-conforming, and it's really important that people understand that gender non-conforming has nothing to do with like somebody's appearance. It really
mhm,
is a way of being and moving about in this world. I lean a lot into my femininity for strength, but I
mhm,
also have a lot of masculine tendencies, and I shouldn't be ashamed of those either because those are seen as unfeminine, unwoman-like things. Um, and so I just feel more comfortable when people just understand that about me, even if it's something that they really don't understand, just to know that that's how I am. Some days you might see me at my highest feminine self. Sometimes you're not going to see me in that way. And
mhm,
all of those things are who I am. I'm not being fake either way,
mhm.
either any way that I'm presenting or out in the world. It is not fake. It is just one of the many things that I am. And so that's how
It's
I
really interesting. We have to have more of these conversations
yeah,
because when you have not mentioned sexuality, sex in any
exactly.
form of this whole conversation about
Exactly.
being genderqueer, and most people immediately add some kind of sexual
Exactly.
connotation to the words and to what
Exactly.
you're saying. So I really appreciate thinking about it from that perspective because for me it's a lot of news. I don't know about the binary, the
Yep.
non-binary. All of those things are new
Mhm.
for me, and I try and
Absolutely.
I read about it, and just to be educated about what it means, right,
Yep.
is important. So I think these conversations need to be had in spaces. So I really appreciate the way you just described all of that, right?
Absolutely.
And
It's a big confusing thing or people, and it's okay. It's okay to be like, this is new and I don't know any of this. I'm
right.
just taking your lead on it.
Right,
Uh-huh.
right,
Sure.
it
I support it.
is.
I had to learn that. Even though I'm young and I understand a lot of it, I still was very behind in a lot of the ideas and the terminology that I know was always present, but just still learning for the first time in my life.
Mhm. Yeah, it really interesting. I found myself in my only video was done about a young lady who committed suicide, and the whole
Hmm.
song was about be all that you can be. And I
Yeah.
was the mother, right, in the
Yeah.
video, right? And
Yep.
I mean, and it was all about even the parents. How do you deal with your
Yeah.
kids, right? And then, it's really sad that she killed herself. But the idea of the whole video was that there's no shame in being
Exactly.
whoever you want to be. And when I first went, I knew nothing about what I was getting into, right? But it turned
Absolutely.
into like a beautiful project. And over time, you're hearing more and more about the non-binary, binary, these words, right? The
Yeah.
gender queer, the LGBTQ plus, right?
Yep.
And all of that. I think just having the education and understanding it is
Hmm.
really, really important. So thank
Absolutely.
you for sharing that. One of the things I wanted you to walk through, we have a few more minutes, is
Yeah.
if a person, like, how would you advise a person into getting involved?
Hmm.
Because I know I saw how your story went from how you got involved from being in school. How would
Yeah.
what tips?
Oh my God. So, I mean, in New York City, there is so many ways to get involved. So I would always start with finding what matters to you most. Education advocacy mattered to me. I could speak to almost every experience I had from K to 12 and beyond
Mhm.
as far as what I would change in that education system. And so that's why I think that makes me a strong activist, because it
Mhm.
actually comes from things that I personally experienced. So, I'm not saying if you're not from that experience, you shouldn't be in this space, you shouldn't be an ally or supporting. But I think for you to take action, it has to be something you are really angry about
Mhm.
and have direct experience with the issue, or
Mhm.
else it feels like you're just a volunteer at a table. It
Mhm.
has to matter to you. um, and when you find that, search all the organizations that you can find in New York, and I swear there's so many across
Mhm.
all boroughs. Maybe Staten Island. Maybe Staten Island is the exception, but
Everybody throws that knowledge to the ground, right?
yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of work going on there. I'm not aware of it though. But Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, and Manhattan all have really great local organizations doing great work. If it's environmental justice, if it's criminal justice reform, if it's school reform, if it's healthcare, and any of those systems, if it's mental health,
Mm.
which is a really huge
Big
thing that I
one,
know that
yeah,
people are trying to get involved in.
right.
So I would find these organizations. They traditionally have spaces for people who are just outside community members that just want to get involved, to do so.
Mhm.
And so if once you get your foot in the door, I think just be committed in some way.
Mm.
I started, I think, doing my own kind of activism when I went to an event on just it, they had a social justice fair
Mhm.
basically before the event, so they had a lot of people table up, and I met this person, Diana King, who again another mentor, another person who inspired me, really really strong organizer. Started at the community and college fellowship working with women who were formerly incarcerated get back to school or get into school and graduate, get their degree,
Mhm.
as well push through their experience, using their experience, um, educational reform for people both inside and outside the prison, the criminal justice system.
Mhm.
And I just put my name on a volunteer sheet, and
Mhm.
they would invite me to every single action. And it was just great to see what it looked like behind the scenes. And so many organizations operate similar ways and really do need volunteer support or any kind of support. So
Mhm.
I would definitely just try to get started in a small way and stay committed in that small way until you're
Mhm.
ready to do more and take on more responsibility.
That's cool. I like what you said. Find something that you're angry about, right? And
Absolutely.
then you'll want to go in and
Yes.
make change, right? And be a
Yes.
part of change.
Because when that meeting is at 8 o'clock p.m. on a Thursday and you're ready tired from your work week, what else is going to drive you to go to that meeting other than anger, other than I am fed up with this?
Right. And I want to see change. Yeah. Well, that time has come.
Speaking of time.
It's been really great
Mhm.
chatting with you. Thank you for
Of course.
everything that you shared. Passion creates purpose. That's right, Prophet.
Absolutely.
It really does,
Absolutely.
right? That's a nice quote. But thank you so much, Melody, for joining me tonight on Conversations with Reverend G. And hope to see you in New York soon.
I'm coming out there, gonna
Yeah.
cause some trouble now that, the cops can't find my residence.
Right.
But this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me
Yeah,
on.
yeah. And
So
so,
much fun.
yeah, I'll be in touch. Have a great evening.
Absolutely. Have a great night.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me tonight on Conversations with Reverend G. And you can find me every Monday night right here, WEMS Radio Live on Facebook and on YouTube. I like that phrase that passion equals purpose. So that's how we're going to roll out tonight, thinking about what are you passionate about and how you can turn that into your purpose. I'm Reverend G, and you can find me every day on Facebook, Reverend Grenetta Mason, on YouTube, Rev Grenetta. You have a great week and know that I'm here to support you in living your best life. Enjoy with grace and ease. I will see you next week.